Good Sunday morning. I'm Jaden Jefferson, and welcome to this week's Community Focus. My guest is State Senator Paula Hicks-Hudson, who represents the Toledo area in the Ohio legislature. I'm asking her about Senate Bill 56, which passed along party lines this week. Democrats opposed it, Republicans supported it. It makes changes to the state's recreational cannabis law that voters voted for. However, there's a breakdown that happens, obviously, when there's a party line vote. So I'm asking her why there are disagreements and what the law actually says. Take a look. Explain what the changes are in the text of this bill.
Well, primarily, I think some most significant changes is how, for the tax revenue, how it's going to be divided up between certain types of funds have now been put into what's, going back into the general fund without any real designation. And, some of the things that many of the local communities were banking on was that revenue coming to them. And that's under this legislation, that's not going to happen. The other thing for consumers is that voters passed the law so that you could have, each individual could have 6 plants. And if you had two people in a household, you could have up to 12 plants. Well, so they changed that to only 6 plants per household, not per individual. The other thing that is really bothersome is that the laws regarding smoking in public, under the rules that were created, you could, the same prohibition for smoking, smoking cigarettes was also applied to smoking marijuana. And that has been restricted that you can only smoke in your house. So you can't smoke outside, you can't smoke in your backyard. And there's also some concern that if, say, people, part of the whole culture about sharing, the cigarette or whatever, they can't do that. So how you might have passed one, you can't share because that could be considered breaking the law. And so to me, those are the highlights. But the biggest thing was deciding not to abide by what the voters voted for and changing that. And it's been, almost a year since the law was passed and there were rules put into place. And so folks who were going to be able to, it's all one other thing I forgot was that it limits pretty much those who can get a license to sell adult marijuana. It's limited to those who already have the medical marijuana facilities. So if you wanted to get into the business now, you're probably pretty much foreclosed from being able to do that.
And as I mentioned, this bill, it passed along party lines. So obviously Republicans, they voted for this. Democrats opposed it. You kind of spoke to this where there was the breakdown in the divide and where that stemmed from. But was it just the fact that this bill overall was the issue here with the divide of where people were going to vote on this?
For me, my voting no was because I don't want to presume that I know what's better than the people that vote that express their opinion and their vote. So, and the idea that people did not know what was in the bill, I think is disingenuous and just a slap in the face to the Ohio voters, where, out of all of the counties, only 3 counties defeated this initiative. The rest of the counties, people in those counties voted in favor of passing that legislation as it was written. And we have legislators coming in late, not even being ready to deal with it as soon as the law passed, but have allowed for all this time to go forward. And now you're changing the rules. And to me, that is undemocratic. And whether you are in favor or against marijuana, I think we live in a democracy, and everyone's saying that if the people speak, we should, recognize that and accept it. But that's not what happened here yesterday, really.
And one of the things you mentioned was that, yes, it has taken lawmakers time to address this. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But I also do want to kind of touch on the idea here that you've made the case, as others have, that the will of the voters shouldn't be amended. But then there are also people who argue that the state legislature exists to look at the law and make changes. What do you say in face of that argument? And do you feel that the lawmakers who did support this bill have legitimate concerns about the law?
I can't answer whether or not they have legitimate concerns. I can answer, my opinion is that there are processes in place that would address those legitimate concerns. And those legitimate concerns were done because the legislature failed to act in the first place. And if the legislature had passed passed laws that would have permitted adult recreational marijuana that contain the terms that they have right now, then you would be able to say that their concerns are legitimate. Instead, they punted and left it up to the people to make those decisions. And in doing that, we now have, to me, this slap in the face. One of the concerns, I'll give an example. One of the concerns that was raised was that this law would now make it harder for children to have access to, marijuana because of the way that it can only be packaged a certain way. It can't be attractive to young people and things like that. Well, I believe the rules already are in existence that says you can't do those things. So I don't necessarily buy that argument that I think that there may be something else going on, and I don't think that it's right.
Could you shed some light on some of the challenges that the state has had with this? Because obviously getting in front of this issue hadn't happened. So in terms of the execution of this law, what were some of the challenges that came with that?
I can't really answer those challenges to speak to that because the majority chose not to discuss with the minority legislators much of what they should have been doing and working on this all along. Instead, I think that they waited to the 11th hour to determine what they could do. And then, as always, do a rush job and pass something that I don't think meets the will of the people.
Looking ahead, obviously, this bill heads to the Ohio House, likely to pass there. Is this going to be something that is going to be a dramatic change from what the original text of the bill was? And will we see those impacts immediately?
I don't know about seeing the impacts immediately, but I think that there is a major impact on local governments and those entities that we're expecting to be able to benefit, such as local communities that we're going to be able to use those funds to support their local budgets. And instead, this funding is going to go to the state, and then the state's going to determine where it should go. And that to me is really not something that I'm really comfortable with. Secondly, the idea that the amount of homegrown that a person can do, because you can't sell it, you can only grow it for your own use. And so a letter or something in the paper that I saw where a person says that now he may not be able to have enough of the marijuana for his wife who has MS and may have to buy it someplace else, and that not only will be more expensive, but they don't necessarily know what's going to be in it because I forgot, the levels of the THC has been changed from what was voted on to what has been passed by the law. And there's some question about whether there'll be fillers and other things put into these products that may or may be harmful, and that consumers will buy unwittingly, not knowing what's in them. So those are some concerns that I don't know if those were thought out by the people who proposed these laws or not.
And one of the things that you've brought up a couple times here is the fact that this money will obviously be up in the state's hands. And this is something that's interesting because already lawmakers, they have these disagreements over how to spend the state's money and how and where to write the checks to. So is that going to be an issue now where the money is coming to the state and lawmakers who already don't agree on a lot of things are going to have to decide amongst themselves how to spend it?
Absolutely. I mean, even so, how lawmakers decide on spending it, the fact that there was an agreement and the city's local governments relied on that agreement, relied on the law as it was written and voted on by the people, expecting that there will be funding available for their local projects. Now there's going to have to be some kind of changes made to the local budgets and those projects, as well as the authorization of where those dollars will be spent. Will they be spent in law enforcement? Will they be spent in mental health? Will they be spent, on other things that this bill did not contemplate? Not the bill, but the not the question before the citizens was not what they asked for.
Well, this obviously is going to be something that we'll be continuing to follow because, of course, the bill heads to the Ohio House next. So State Senator Paula
Correct.
Hicks-Hudson, thanks for coming onto the show and offering your perspective as well as some insight on the bill.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for allowing me to talk about it. Take care.